All right, we are ready to go, and I hope you can hear me clearly. My name is Rawlings, and I am with Agribusiness Media, and I am your moderator. So today's discussion is on maximizing soybean yield potential. And we know that it is the aim of every farmer to maximize on yield, as high yield is directly related to the profit that you make. And a higher yield also means reduced production costs that are driven by the economies of scale. But what is it that we need in order to get the highest soybean yield? So joining us today is Ngoni Dashemu Pumba. He is a qualified agronomist with a vast of experience in the agricultural industry. So Ngoni is representing Fossil Agro. Ngoni, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, sir, and good morning, our esteemed farmers.
Thanks, Ngoni. Sure, thanks. We are doing well, and we look forward to your presentation this morning. So to our farmers, please note that there will be a question and answer session right after Ngoni's presentation. And as usual, we would like to make this session as interactive as possible. So please ask all the questions that you have or that you wish, either via the chat room when we open, and if you're watching us live on Facebook, please do share your thoughts or questions in the comment section. And hopefully, time permitting, we will try and answer all your questions. And welcome once again, Ngoni, and please go ahead straight into your presentation.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity. All right. Can you move on to the next slide? Right. As you saw on our previous slide, the topic for discussion today is on maximizing soybean production. Maximizing soybean yield potential. But of course, in the context of this discussion, it is very important for us to start by, defining the key terms so that at least we all appreciate and understand what we are talking about, because we might actually get some people lost in the discussion after they might actually fail to comprehend what is it that we are talking about. So I will start by defining the key terms from the topic that we are discussing today. So the first one being crop yield potential. So the crop yield potential is obtained when a crop is grown without any limits on water, be it on nutrients, and also maybe in terms of absence of pests, diseases, and weeds. So basically, we are talking about in an ideal environment where everything is equal. They actually use this term called ceteris paribus, everything else being constant. So this is what we get when we are talking about the crop yield potential. This is the potential that we can get, the potential that is actually inherent in the genetic potential of the seed, which is bred by our different breeders. Then you move on to look at maximizing. So to maximize it is to make as large or great as possible. So we are saying, in terms of our crop potential, our crop yield potential, if we are maximizing, we are employing the best strategies, we are employing the good agricultural practices so that we can get the best possible and the greatest possible yields. Next slide. Right now, everything starts in planning. Everything starts in planning. So before the farmer comes into the other season, the first thing that the farmer has to do is to make sure that they sit down to plan. And the first thing that they need to consider in terms of planning is the variety selection. Now, we are going to look at the factors to consider when you are selecting a soybean variety. The first one is that you also need to make sure that you use certified seed. Certified seed, this simply means the seed that has been tested, seed but that has been well bred by breeders in the various seed companies we have in this country. The seed that is well been tested in terms of seed viability. It has also been tested in terms of germination. It has also been tested in terms of crop uniformity, and also the true to typeness, the very important factor in terms of seed technology. Then the next point is on looking at shattering and lodging. Shattering, what it simply means is when you have grown your crop and it has actually reached the physiological maturity stage, at drying, the pods will begin to open up. So after the pods have begun to open up, you are going to experience some losses, pre-harvest losses, when the grains or when the pods, when the grains from the pods begin to fall. So that's shattering. And also lodging is the falling of plants, and it's mostly caused by when you have a high plant population. So normally what we are now looking at when you are considering this factor is you have to consider varieties which are shatter resistant, and you also need to make sure that you choose varieties which are not, which are not susceptible to lodging. And also maybe issues to do with high plant populations. When you put a high plant population, obviously your crop is going to grow thinner and longer. And obviously because of that, it will become very susceptible to lodging. So these are some of the things that you need to consider. And then we move on to the aspect of disease and insect pest resistance. When you choose your variety, you should as well look at the attributes of the variety. I'm sure for all the seed companies, they provide this information in terms of the tolerance or resistance to a certain disease and insect. I don't want to dwell much into the various varieties or cultivars that we have, but the information is always at your disposal. If you ask the salespeople or the agronomists at those seed companies, they will actually give you a lot of information in terms of the attributes of the varieties, and it will also help you in terms of making an informed decision in terms of which variety should you go for in relation to the disease and insect pest resistance. Then you also go to look at the growth habits preference. There are determinate and indeterminate varieties. The determinate varieties, what they do is they do the vegetative growth stage, and they get to where it is halted or it is stopped. And then from there, that's when the reproductive stage will start, the flowering, and also the other processes that follow. That includes like pod formation and a lot of other processes that will follow. And then on indeterminate, this is whereby the crop will actually grow, but then it doesn't end growing. It will get to a point whereby while it is growing, flowering will also start. So that is now the reproductive stage is also coming in, but the crop will continue growing taller, which means now simultaneously there is the vegetative growth as well as the reproductive growth. Then another important factor is the end use. What is it that you want to use the product for? So if you want to use it for human consumption, you now need to go for some varieties which you clearly come out with a bigger seed and bigger seed. And if you want to come in with, if you want also to grow for forage and hay, you'd also need to consider now the herbage value, the stem size, the leaves, how big the crop can grow and everything, because there are some people who actually use it for forage and hay. So it depends on what you want to use, the soybeans at the end of the day. If it's for human consumption, then it means that the most important part, the harvestable component, will be your seeds. And it's very important to go for the varieties that will culminate into very good and bigger and larger seeds. But if it's for forage and hay, then you might as well, focus on the vegetative aspect, the vegetative traits of the variety, and also the herbage value that I've actually highlighted earlier on. Then the next point being an issue of pod clearance. This is now the distance between the pod, where the pod ends and the ground. That is the clearance. So you would need varieties with a high pod clearance. The advantage is that when it has got a lower pod, when it has got a lower pod clearance, the disadvantage is that it will actually be closer to the ground. And when you are harvesting, in some cases, the combine harvester will not be able to pick it. And that will actually result in pre and post harvesting losses, because that is going to fall. And when it falls on the ground, the combine harvester may not be able to pick it. So it will actually culminate into a harvesting loss, which is something that we wouldn't want. So it's very important that we also choose varieties with a very high pod clearance. And we also need to consider the fact that we have got what we refer to as an optimum growing season, where we receive our rainfall properly, and where there is a good rainfall distribution, when we also have effective rains, and a lot of other factors relating to rainfall. So we also need to make sure that we have got varieties that fit within the optimum growing seasons. For example, you would know that a very good rain season in most cases in our context, it ranges between maybe 3 to 4 months. So obviously, if there is a variety, for example, that will go up to 5 months, then it means you might have a problem in some stages of growth. And therefore, it is very important for you to make sure that when you are selecting a variety, you select a variety that fits within the optimum growing season that we have in this country. Despite wherever you are, be it in the low field, be it in the high field, you also need to make sure that you consider that. Then, of course, the reason why we are doing soybean production is for us to get high yields at the end of the day. So it's very important for us to consider that as well. You might need, yes, a variety that fits within optimum growing season, high pod clearance, and other good traits or characteristics that we've discussed above. But it's also very important that you consider the issue of yield, because despite all the other good traits, but if the yield is not very good, then at the end of the day, there's nothing that we get. So it's very important for us to keep our focus on the harvestable component, or actually the yield. So the yield has to be very good. And you also need to look at the issue of stem drying or stem dehydration. So you would realize that your pods will also begin to dry as your crop reaches physiological maturity. So you wouldn't want a situation whereby your pods have dried out and yet your stem has remained very green. It's difficult for you to come in and harvest. And you realize that by the time that you wait for the stem to dry, shattering will have started. That is what I've explained earlier on when I said shattering is when the pods start to open and then the grain will actually drop on the ground. So that will actually result in yield losses. So you need to have a variety where the stem dries at the same time with the pods, so that you won't have problems of shattering. You can, as soon as the crop dries, you can then come in with a combine harvester and then you harvest without any problems. Next slide. Right, then there is this issue of seed inoculation and purpose. Let me start by explaining the fact that for most legumes, there is need for inoculation. I mean, there is need for nitrogen fixation, inoculation and nitrogen fixation. It happens in a lot of legumes, But now the difference between soybean and other legumes is that soybean is very specific to a bacteria that it requires to engage with, so that it can fix nitrogen and it can actually do nodulation and provide nitrogen for the crop. So for other crops like cowpeas it can combine with it can combine with a lot of bacteria in the soil. But then soybean is specific to a bacteria which is called Bradyrhizobium japonicum. But then the challenge is that this bacteria is very, very rare in most soils, or should I say it's very deficient in most soils. And therefore, there's need for us to add an inoculant. So this is the reason why we add an inoculant. So some farmers would say, but what is the reason of inoculating? Why can't I just put the seed and then, just plant like that? It becomes a challenge now because the seed will fail to find, or it will fail to locate the specific bacteria that it requires for nodulation and nitrogen fixation. So what then happens is that you actually get a poor yield. You actually, get a failed crop. So it is important for us to make sure that we supply this inoculant so that we enhance our chances of making sure that we maximize on our yield potential. Once there is an inoculant, once there is nodulation and nitrogen fixation, we are pretty assured that at the end of the day, we are going to get a very good yield. So nodulation, seed inoculation is very, very important. Farmers must not skip this part. Right, we move on to look at the planting and crop establishment. Let's start by looking at the seed rate, which is between 90 to 100 kgs per hectare. But it is also, of course, determined by the seed size, because you'd realize that for large size, the seed, You might need maybe 100 kgs, or you might even get up to 110 kgs, so that you can actually have enough seed to plant and make sure that your crop establishment is within the optimum planting populations. But of course, for smaller seeds, you might as well get to 90 kgs, because when they are small, it will also mean that there will be many seeds within the bag. So perhaps 90 kgs can actually be enough. And then also the plant population, it ranges between 300,000 to 500,000 plants per hectare, which is allowable. But of course, there is the challenge which comes with having a higher plant population, which is the danger of lodging that I've also highlighted in the previous slides. But now, there's also an advantage which is associated with the higher plant population, which is high pod clearance. Let me try to explain how pod clearance will actually result from a higher plant population. So when you have a higher plant population, the stems will actually grow thinner. And after growing thinner, it will actually grow taller. So the moment it grows taller, it then means that the pod clearance becomes higher. That is the distance from the ground to the last pod. So it will mean that even when you are going to come in with your combine harvester, you come in and harvest properly. Why? Because there's not going to be any pods which are on the ground surfaces, because obviously when you are harvesting, you won't put your head on the ground. You put it slightly above the ground so that you don't pick the soils, you don't pick in some other debris. And also, if you are in a field that has got some logs, there won't be any logs which are going to cause breakdowns, because breakdowns are one thing that you would need when you're harvesting, because that will contribute or constitute, they will constitute towards downtime. So in these operations, you just need to make sure that everything is efficient and you have got a very minimal downtime. So yes, higher plant population can result in slimmer and taller plants, and that will also increase the higher plant population. I mean, that will also increase the higher pod clearance. So in as much as would recommend lower plant populations, but it's also important for farmers to consider this point, put a higher plant population and also make sure that there's a higher pod clearance. But then there has to be a balance in terms of the populations that are put vis-a-vis the issue of lodging. Because if you put a higher plant population up to 550,000, you might as well experience the danger of lodging. But it's very important for a farmer at least to come up with a moderate plant population, which is within the allowable, population that is between 300 and 500,000, so that at least you make sure that the plants can actually grow taller and emerge with a higher pod clearance. Then the issue of spacing is actually determined by the plant population that you want to achieve. For example, we have got a range here to say 300,000 to 500,000 plants per hectare. So if you want to achieve 300,000 plants per hectare, then it would also mean that the plant spacing will be different from someone who is going to employ a 400,000 plants per hectare. And it's also going to be different from someone who is going to do 450,000 plants per hectare. So it's all dependent on the preference and what you also come in with in terms of the machinery. For example, some people may actually would want to put an indoor spacing of 45 centimeters. Yes, it's perfect if you are doing on a smaller scale, and maybe you wouldn't need tractors to come in so that you spray with your tractors. But if you know that you have got your tractors, the tractors would need to come in and spray, the tractors would come in to do a lot of other things. Then it means that you need to make sure that you put an indoor spacing that will allow the wheels of the tractor to fit in between the rows without damaging the crop. Because if you ignore that, then it means that if you put 45 centimeters and you'd want to come in to spray with a tractor, then it definitely you would be damaging what? You'll be damaging the crop. So you need to make sure that your spacing is enough for the tractor to fit in. That is if you're going to come in with your tractor. But of course, with the advent of technology, we now have some farmers who are using the chemigation tank, which is connected to the center pivot. So maybe they apply their fungicides, they also apply their pesticides using the pivots through the chemigation unit. So perhaps those ones might actually go for 45 centimeters, as there won't be any need for them to come in with a tractor. But for those who are going to come in with a tractor, so just make sure that you put an indoor spacing that allows you to come in with a tractor, and also so that the tractor doesn't damage your rows or doesn't affect the crop. Then when a crop fails to establish within the optimum plant populations, already our yield potential has been affected. So on this subject, if you revert back to the discussion we are having, we are talking about maximizing soybean yield potential. So you realize that for us to maximize, we have to maximize what is there. So once we fail to establish a crop within the optimum planting populations, then it becomes a challenge. We have very little to protect. So even if you come in with your basal fertilizers, even if you come in with a very comprehensive and clear crop protection program, you realize that at the end of the day, your yields will be very, very low. Why? Because you would have failed at the establishment of the crop. So the crop establishment is the very important starting stage for you to know where you are going. Because, for example, if we are supposed to say have an optimum planting population of 350,000 plants per hectare, and then when you are planting, you fail to do your calibration properly, you fail to do things that you are supposed to be doing, and then maybe you established 200,000 or maybe 150,000 plants per hectare. Already you are very far from getting within the optimum planting populations. So what it means, no matter how good you are in terms of good agricultural practices, no matter how good you are in terms of making sure that you employ the best practices in terms of management, no matter how much effort you put in everything that you do, whether you are doing your operations seamlessly or not, you are not going to be able to achieve the expected yield. You are not going to achieve the expected yield. Why? Because there has been a failure in terms of your crop establishment. So you just need to make sure that the starting point when you are getting to the field is to calibrate your planter very well. Make sure that you are planting and you are going to establish your plant populations within the optimum that we require. It has to be between the range of 300,000 to 500,000, so that at least when you're doing your crop protection, you've got something to protect. And you can also maximize on your yield. Right. Then there are aspects to do with management in terms of mid-season crop management. Right. What we also need to do is we just don't need to look at the strength of our varieties and also the other things that we need to look at, but we also need to look at the susceptibilities so that we know the weaknesses of the varieties, and we also know the course of action to do during those periods or during those stages where we know that our soybean crop is susceptible, is rather vulnerable to some environmental issues, especially those that we can have an intervention and control over. So now, soybean is susceptible to drought, especially during its flowering and pod filling stage. So obviously, there comes in the need for supplementary irrigation if it is available, so that we can apply water during these times. So I've just tried to put some critical periods which a farmer must make sure that moisture or water is applied during those periods. And if there is a failure to provide enough moisture or sufficient moisture for the crop during those periods, then it might as well result in a very poor yield. So in an attempt to make sure that we maximize on our yield, we need to make sure that we appreciate these stages, we conceptualize them, and we make sure that as they approach, we are ready for supplementary irrigation. As they approach, we are ready. Be it now that we have got power outages, it's very important that people have got backup generators at their farms. So sometimes they might choose not to come in with supplementary irrigation, but they must keep these dates so that, when we have power challenges during these stages, they must make sure that the power backups are there, and then irrigation is done so that we don't lose out on our crop and we maximize on our crop. So ingemination is 1 to 6 days, then flowering is 55 to 75 days. Water must be there on each of and every day of these stages. Then also pod filling, it occurs between 95 days and 125. We should also make sure that there are rains these days. I mean, there's supplementary irrigation, sorry, because we know that rain does not always come when we want. Sometimes there are mid-season dry spells. So a dry spell can actually fall during the period when your crop is flowering. So you just need to make sure that you've got supplementary irrigation so that you can come in and make sure that you protect your crops. And then weed management, now we recommend that you come in with your Formula 1, which has got metolachlor and flumetolachlor at 1.5 milliliters per hectare as a pre-emergence. We also have the second alternative, which is metribuzin and metolachlor. You come in with that as a pre-emergence. These, they all work, and they work to suppress the weed disease that will be on the surface. So after planting, before the crop emerges, you irrigate, and then after irrigating, then you come in with your herbicide so that you can suppress the weed seeds that will be on the surface. Next slide. Right, and also, in terms of disease management, I think there's a slide which is missing. Can you go to the next slide? I think there's a mistake here. Right, yeah. So this is weed management continued. Weed management continued. So in terms of post-emergence herbicide, we've got our fluazivop and agio, which is for your grasses, including the couch grass. And at Tsangads, there's no one's one. If we have got problems with the Tsangads and stuff, we can as well recommend you to come in with your fluazivop and agio for those grasses. So these are two herbicides which are different. That's why I had to say fluazivop / agio, sorry. So you can choose any of those two. Then for our broadleaves, we've got chlorimiron or classic. Then we also have bendazone and basagran for the broadleaves. Then in some fields, in some areas, we've got farmers with problematic weeds like the gallant soja, the milkweed, and the Mexican clover, which in some cases may not be, eliminated by some other herbicides for broadleaves that I've mentioned above. So one may need to come in with imazethepia, also known as Pest, for both grasses and broadleaves weeds. So with these chemicals at your disposal, you won't be able to face challenges with any of the weeds in your soybean crop. Be it Tsangads, we've said Tsangads can be eliminated by fluazivop, and imazethepia in the cases where you have these other problematic and resistant weeds. Then let's go back to the other slide that we've skipped. Right, in terms of disease management, there is a dumping off, which normally affects our seed. Which normally affects our crop at seedling stage. So what we need to do now is to make sure that we take Thiram, a fungicide, which is also used as a seed dresser, so that we dress our seed, and then it protects our crop from dumping off at seedling stage. So we just need to make sure that we put it as a seed dresser. Then we also have diseases like soybean rust, we have downy mildew, we have fusarium, we have rhizoctonia. I'm sorry, I forgot to put something here, but then you need to come in with your, we have got two options rather. The first one, you can come in with the tebuconazole, and then the second option, you can come in with tridimenol or Shavit. It can actually deal with all these fungal diseases. And I think you may need 2 applications of the fungicide so that you make sure that your crop is protected. Please don't take chances. Some will say, I can escape without applying a fungicide. Of course, in some instances, you may escape, but then we don't recommend farmers to play that game. We don't recommend farmers to take those risky games, because if it tends to affect you, then eventually you might actually experience a 100% loss. So farmers must make sure that they apply their fungicide at least 2 applications per crop cycle. Sorry. Right. Next slide. Right. In terms of pest management, you also need to make sure that as soon as you plant, you put your seed down, you would have dealt with the issue of pest. So normally, as your seedling will emerge, there are some cutworms who are actually going to come in, and then they are going to cut on the stems. And obviously, that will actually affect your crop stand or your crop establishment. So the best way to make sure that you deal with this problem is that when you are applying your pre-emergence herbicide, that is after planting but before your crop emerges, you put lambda together, or you mix lambda together with the pre-emergence herbicide at the rate of 200 ml per hectare, so that you deal with your cutworms that may want to affect the crop as it emerges. So the moment the seedling will emerge, it won't be able to be, it won't be affected by the cutworms, because already, lambda has been put in together with the pre-emergence, and the cutworms will have been dealt with already. So you are going to have a very good crop that emerges quite nicely, and it is not going to be affected by your cutworms. And also in terms of your armyworms, your beetles, your stem borer, you need Macten, which has got an active ingredient of emamectin benzoate. You also need 250 grams per 200 liters of water, or 250 grams per hectare. Then in terms of your stink bugs, your aphids, you need Nemesis, which has got the advantage of having two active ingredients, that is acetamiprid and emamectin benzoate. So acetamiprid is a systemic pesticide, is a systemic, and emamectin benzoate is contact. So you now have a combination of a contact and a systemic herbicide, a systemic insecticide in one. That will actually render Nemesis as a broad spectrum insecticide or pesticide, because it will affect both the systemic pests. It will actually affect the sap-sucking pest, sorry, and also the emamectin benzoate will also affect the contact or the tissue eating pest. So Nemesis is a very good insecticide that one can use because it has got that advantage, both systemic and contact. Next slide. Right, at harvesting, it is also important that farmers must make sure that as soon as their crop is reached physiological maturity and they've taken samples to test the moisture, and it ranges between 13 to 15%, then it means that the soybean is now ready for harvesting. So there isn't supposed to be a very long waiting period between physiological maturity and harvesting. Why? Because if you give that space, that is when shattering will start. The pods will open up and the grains will actually fall on the field, and this will result in losses. Because obviously, when you are going to come in with your combine harvester, it won't be able to pick the grains that would have fallen on the ground, even when you are hand harvesting. But of course, it may be difficult for people to go about picking each and every single grain. It becomes very difficult. So as soon as our crop reaches physiological maturity, then we need to come in with our combine harvesters. If we are using the machinery, then we harvest with our combine harvesters, and then we remove the crop from the field and start bagging. And if you are going to take your soybeans to the GMB, you start delivering. If we have got a different market, then you start mobilizing resources so that you put your soybeans where it's supposed to be. And then for small areas, you can actually hand harvest, like I highlighted earlier on. But all the same, you need to avoid shattering because it becomes difficult as well to hand pick each and every single grain as a result of shattering. So either way, you need to make sure that after the soybean has reached physiological maturity, you come in early and you actually harvest the crop. And then also combine harvesting is for large areas, but of course, losses are inevitable. So now the degree of loss in terms of using machinery depends upon the efficiency of the machinery and also the operator. So there are some adjustments that are done on the combine harvester. I'm sure those that have got combine harvesters, they know that when you are changing, let's say maybe last winter you were harvesting maybe a different crop with the different settings on the combine harvester. When you now come in to harvest your soya, perhaps you need to change the header. You may also need to change the configuration of the combine harvester. You need now to change the concave and a lot of adjustments that are done. So that is not dependent on the machine, to be honest, but it depends on the operator. The operator must be well versed with all these things so that when they are about to start harvesting, they know what is supposed to be done and they've done all those things correctly. Because if the adjustments that are supposed to be done are not done correctly, you might actually having some grain falling down after it has been harvested. Some will actually go to the container where the harvested produce is actually stored. But you might as well see that some are going to be lost, some grains are going to be lost and dropped on the ground. So it requires someone with very vast knowledge in terms of operations of the machinery, and also the machinery must be in a good state. So it goes without saying that the farmers must make sure that during that period when the crop is growing, the combine harvester must be serviced. Everything must be set and the configuration must be done so that things are in shape and the farmer is actually well prepared for the season that is, for the harvesting that is to come. So I think we can also move to the next slide. Right, then we've got other issues like yield. The yield normally the range between 3 to 4 tons per hectare, but this is under very good management. Some people tend to think that if they just throw or if they just plant, the soybean seed, ultimately they're going to get a yield which is within that range. But it's not something that is pretty obvious. It's something that has to be worked for. So the farmers must make sure that they employ very good agronomic practices so that they can get a yield which is between, that range 3 to 4 hectares. At least you get, a lucrative profits. It becomes a lucrative venture or a lucrative project if you get your yields which are between 3 to 4 tons. But of course, if you get under 2 tons, you will struggle to make sure that you break even, and as well as perhaps getting a little income or a little profit from there. So people must know that it's very important for you to make sure that your operations are done timelessly, and you employ good agronomic practices. You do everything according to the book so that you attain the yields which are within the range of 3 to 4 tons. And also, there are some people who might be asking questions relating to issue of soybeans. Does it have a market, this and that? But if you follow literature, you would realize that for the past, I don't know how many years, we've been producing soybeans, which is actually below the national demand. So it's something that we need to consider. It's a crop that is in high demand. And if you realize, I think it was last year but one, there was an issue of cooking oil prices, on the rise, and the minister had to come in and talk about the crude soybean oil that we import from other countries. So it's a sign that soybean is a crop that we so much need. It's actually in high demand, and it's a very, very important crop in our country. So basically, people must not worry about whether the prices are going to be low, and also whether is it going to be demanded or not. It is always in high demand, and the prices are always high because as a country, we are actually producing a short supply of our national demands. Next slide. Right, in conclusion, I think as I've highlighted earlier on, farmers must make sure that they take good agronomic practices seriously. They must never cut corners. They must never think that, something is just going to happen, a miracle is just going to happen, even if they don't come in to apply herbicide, or even if they just leave everything as it is, then they will just leave it and say, no, everything will just be fine. So we need to put an effort. We need to make sure that we employ all the approaches which are necessary. And whenever we face challenges, please, let's consult. We have got a competent team of agronomists that is always available at your disposal, so that whenever you've got questions, you can as well ask those questions, because it's very important for you to do things as recommended, rather than for you to just do things and then regret later after doing things which are maybe against the recommendations, or which are in parallel directions with, in opposite directions rather, with the actual recommendations. Remember, some of these recommendations, or all of these recommendations, they are made after, a vigorous research. So research is done, data is captured, and results come out quite well. And then the recommendations will be as per research. So it's not just someone sitting down and then thinking, no, I can just come in and spray this. No, this is a product of research. So farmers, whenever they face challenges, they must consult our agronomists so that they can they can help them in whatever they want. In terms of planning, even well before the season, we can sit down together, we can plan, we can look at variety selection, we can look at the land preparation, what must be that must be done. We can also come up with an exact plant population that we may want to achieve, the calibration of the planters. Then we move on to look at the issues to do with fertilizers. We may as well, come in and also help you in terms of calibration of boom spray, so that you don't waste chemicals, but you just make sure that you apply as per requirement. Because remember, at the end of the day, this is a business. So you don't just need to spray to waste, but you need to spray appropriately and where necessary. So this is where, as agronomists, we come in to make sure that we assist you and calibrate so that you spray appropriately and the correct application rates, so that you minimize your cost, you keep your cost, you keep your cost lower, you minimize losses, and at the end of the day, you get higher returns. So farmers must not take the ostrich approach of putting the head in the sand and assuming, or just telling yourself that everything is fine and everything will be okay. We need to look up, we need to look at our field constantly every day. We need to do our scouting to see what's going on in our field, which pests are dominant, so that at least we can be able to make a decision in terms of which a pesticide do we need to come in with. We also need to look at our weed species diversity in the field. It also helps us to come in with the appropriate herbicides. Because if you just say, no, Ngoni said, I spray this herbicide, then you just spray that herbicide. But we also need to have a clear examination in terms of the weed spectrum, the weed species diversity in the field, so that we understand that, okay, if there are these weeds, then the appropriate herbicide is like this. So farmers must make sure that they familiarize with their fields, they familiarize with the weeds, they also know the weeds which are dominant in their field, so that when they are asking for help, when they are consulting their agronomists, they come up with an informed position. And also the consultation process will actually result in recommendations that are informed and that are going to work, because there will be a clear comprehension of the problem at hand. So below our contacts, that's my contact on the top there, and there's also Mr. Marongese's contact, who is the head of sales and agronomy. Then there's Tapiwa, there's Hebert, there's Terence, there's Dion. Those are our agronomists at Fossil Agro. So farmers might as well take this opportunity to take these contacts, so that they can approach or they can contact any of those agronomists anytime, so that they can get assistance in whatever they want. We also do farm visits for free. We also assist in terms of calibration, like I've said, for free. All the issues to do with your crop protection, we offer our services for free. But would also encourage you guys to buy from us, especially when you have got your challenges, when you need your chemicals. We are always open for you, except for Saturdays and Sunday. Our warehouses are always open from Monday to Friday. Our main offices and the warehouses at Masasa, 521 Access Road. We also have a new warehouse at Santon in Mount Hamden. Then we also have a shop in Karoi. And we have got quite a number of agro dealers that we deal with across the country. So if you have got a challenge wherever you are looking for our products and you can't find it, you can just contact any of the agronomists above. They will help you so that you can get our chemicals. And please feel free to ask anything. Some people might actually think, no, but this is, I'm now becoming a nuisance. No, just approach us. Just ask us anything that you need anytime. We'll be at your service for anything that you need. I thank you.
All right, thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation, Ngoni. And as we have seen, we need to take good agronomic practices seriously, and we need to select the right variety, and to ensure that we do maintain an optimum plant population. And Ngoni also stressed that weed control, pest and disease control are key issues that we really need to take seriously when it comes to us achieving a high yield potential. So if you do have questions for Ngoni, please do type in the chat room. We have opened our chat room, and if you're watching on Facebook, do type in the comment section. So we have a couple of questions here for you, Ngoni, and the first one is from Matimba. He says, thanks, Ngoni, for such a great presentation. It is quite informative. Can I rotate maize with soybeans?
Yes, it's very possible. Yes, it's very possible. You can rotate maize and soya. And I think one other thing that I am supposed to comment on is that your selection of herbicides that you use is actually very important. I mean, all right, when you're actually selecting herbicides, it's very important for you to consider the next crop. Because if you forget that you're going to come in with your soya when you are doing your maize, you might as well come in with a herbicide that has got a longer residual activity, or should I say it has got a residual effect on the next crop. So it is very important for the farmer to know the next crop when they are actually allocating the herbicides that they will be allocating. So yeah, you can rotate soya and maize, but it's very important that when you are growing your maize, you also make sure that you put herbicides that will not affect your maize crop. I'm sure now if you move around, a lot of farmers are talking about the issues to do with atrazine, because they've realized that there's a residual effect on atrazine. If you put atrazine today and you'd want to come in with a legume, be it soybean, sugar bean, obviously there's going to be an effect. There's going to be an injury on the crops, which is caused by your herbicide. So your decision, that's why I was talking about planning earlier on, because when you are planning, you also need to consider the next crop that you're going to come in with. Because if I apply soybean on your maize, I mean, if you apply, atrazine on your maize, then that is going to affect the next crop. So yes, they can be rotated, but keep in mind the next crop so that you put herbicides that will not affect the next crop.
All right, thanks for taking that one. Then another one is, when I get 4 tons per hectare in sandy soils?
Well, in sandy soils, it's a bit tricky. If you look at the soil and climatic requirements for soybeans, you also realize that soybeans, of course, they do perform quite well in soils with a higher clay content. So obviously, since they've got a lower clay content, but of course, what one may need to do is they may need to come in with foliar fertilizers so that at least they compensate for the soil properties of sandy soils. Because the issue with these soils is on soil properties. So the soil properties may not allow the crop maybe to grow as much as it does in other soil properties or in other soil types. So in order maybe to run away from the issue of the soil properties, one might actually come in with to supplement with foliar fertilizers. Different companies, different fertilizer companies, they've got foliar fertilizers. Yeah, the likes of ZFC, the likes of Omnia, and of late there's now Damara and other companies. They've got foliar fertilizers. So you can as well engage agronomists from such companies. They might actually help you in terms of which foliar fertilizers do you need to come in with, so that at least you compensate for the inefficiencies or for the deficiencies that are characterized by soil properties of some sandy soils.
Okay, thanks again, Ngoni. Then we have Jim and Aza saying here, great presentation, thanks. My question is, can I mix metribuzin, metolachlor, and glyphosate as pre-emergence herbicide?
It's very possible. Say you can mix metribuzin, you can mix metolachlor, and you can as well put glyphosate. I think the question is very important. It may help me it has helped in reminding me something. Farmers must always remember that there is issue of compatibility when it comes to chemicals. There are chemicals which are compatible, there are chemicals which are not compatible. So it's not everything that you need to mix. I think that was a very good question. It means that the farmer is alive to the fact that, there are some chemicals that can be mixed and some which cannot be mixed. So yeah, I think it's a very important thing. It's a very important contribution and question, which has actually reminded me of a very important aspect. So yeah, there are some chemicals that can be mixed and that cannot be. And for the question, yes, metribuzin, metolachlor, and glyphosate can be mixed. But of course, there's fluazepop that I have talked about earlier on as a post-emergence herbicide. That one must never be mixed with anything.
Come again on that one, please.
Yeah, I'm saying for the question, metribuzin and metolachlor and glyphosate, they can be mixed and applied at one go. But then we have got fluazepop that I've highlighted earlier on as a post-emergence herbicide for soybean. That one must never be mixed with anything. That one goes alone. When you are spraying it, you go it alone.
All
you
right,
don't need
okay.
to mix with anything. So whenever farmers are about to spray whatever chemicals they have in their chemical rooms or in their storerooms, they need to check with agronomists in terms of compatibility of chemicals, because you may end up burning the crop. We have had incidences of farmers, burning soybean crops after mixing fluazepop maybe with classic or with other chemicals, and then they will burn the whole foliage. and the crop will just remain as a stem. So I encourage farmers before they mix whatever chemicals they want to mix, they should seek clarity in terms of the compatibility of the particular chemicals that they want to use or spray.
All right, thanks. Then I think it's a follow-up question from Chipo. Oh no, it's a different question rather. You said 200 mils per hectare of lambda. How much water do we put, or what is the ratio? How much water do we add to lambda?
Okay. Here at Fossil Agro, the recommendation that we make is the application rate of 200 liters per hectare. So when I say 200 mils of lambda per hectare, I'm trying to say 200 mils of lambda is going to be diluted to 200 liters of water, and then you apply. So even if you go back to the application rates that I was giving, to say 1.5 liters for this and this, then 2 liters per hectare for this and this, it's actually 1.5 liters in 200 liters of water, because that's the application rate that we are advocating for. Mind you, way back then, people would use high rates or they will actually do what we refer to as high volume sprays. But of course, with the issues to do with the environmental protection, we have actually gone in the direction of lower application rates, so that we make sure that we calibrate and apply low. Because once you do the high application rates, you as well be affecting even the fauna, or rather the other the pests which have got nothing to do with the insects which have got nothing to do with your crop. Because mind you, when we are applying these chemicals, we want to deal with the problematic issues within our fields. Anything else that is not within our fields, we are not worried about that. But when we employ high volume sprays, we will actually affect even those which are outside our field. So we need to make sure that we maintain low volume sprays so that we can only affect that which is affecting our crop. So it's 200 mils per hectare, and our hectare is applied 200 liters. So it's 200 mils of lambda into 200 liters of water.
All right, thanks, Ngoni. And Herbert Dera says, well done, Ngoni and Agribusiness, for such an informative program. Will you please arrange for a sunflower one? Yeah, sure, Herbert. We will work on that one. Then Tinashe Nyasha says, is soybean also good for the low veld, particularly Chirezi area under irrigation?
Okay, yeah, soybean can do in different environments, be it the low field and the high field. But then, as alluded earlier on, you now need to pay particular attention to the issues to do with variety selection. There are varieties which do down there. There are also varieties which don't perform very well in the low field, be it in terms of the soil and also in terms of the climate. So yes, Tinashe, soybean can as well be grown that side under irrigation, but one is to make sure that they've chosen a suitable variety for that particular area.
All right, thanks. Then another Tinashe here, Tinashe Varis says, what is the soil pH necessary for soybean?
Soybean requires a pH within the range of 5.5 and 6.5.
All right, thanks. Then Chipo says, can we also have written mixtures of the chemicals and write those that do not want to be mixed with any other chemicals? Yeah, sure, Chipo. I think what we'll do is we will share this recording so that we can always refer to it for certain areas of the presentation that we would want to understand. So, and another question is from Mutasa. Mutasa says, where can I get Fossil Agro products? I'm looking for Metalaclo and I am in Illinois.
Okay. I'm actually a sales agronomist for Mashonaland West Province, and I'm based in Illinois. So I think maybe if possible, you may take him back to the slide, or maybe I can just say my number so that he can contact me, and then we can organize that. I'm actually the sales agronomist for Mashonaland West Province, and I'm based in Illinois. So yes, we can sort out everything. We can meet there and then arrange everything. So maybe you can pick my contact 0773 217 129. I'll come again, 0773 217 129.
All right, thanks, Ngoni. And to our farmers, we have shared Ngoni's contacts in the chat section. Then also, we have another question here from Kembo, who says, how better can I control Tangazi in soybean?
Oh, okay. I think I've mentioned earlier on that we've got that herbicide called fluazepop. Tangazi. It eliminates Tangazi, and you won't have your problems with Tangazi. So what you just need to do is to put 2 liters of fluazepop in 200 liters of water, and the Tangazi problems will be over. Not just the Tangazi problems, but all the problems that you are having with grasses. They will be, just done and dusted once and for all.
Okay, then we have another one here saying, is it true that AN should not be used in soybean production?
Right. Yeah, but it's circumstantial. For example, when you have inoculated perfectly well, obviously inoculation and nitrogen fixation will do quite well. But then when there is no proper inoculation, what it then means is that there won't be a proper nodulation, and also there won't be proper nitrogen fixation. That's when you now need to come in. So now, how do you check that your crop is not nodulated and your nitrogen fixation is not done, or has not been done quite well? You can uproot your crop. You can go to the roots, and then you realize that there will be some small root nodules. You pop up the root nodules so that you can expose and see what is inside. Once you see that there is like a pinkish color inside the pods, then it means that nitrogen fixation would have been, perfectly done. So under such circumstances, then there's no need for you to come in with your AN or any top dressing fertilizers. But once you do, you do the same procedure that I've mentioned. You pop up and then you see that there is nothing. The color is just whitish and there's no pinkish color. Then it simply means that you need now to come in with your fertilizers. But I think the emphasis must be on making sure that inoculation is done perfectly well.
All right, thanks, Ngoni. Then I think the last one we'll take is from Chipo Chitago. Chipo is asking what inoculation is.
Or what inoculation is. All right, as I have highlighted, maybe she missed it during my presentation. I was talking about the issues to do with adding an inoculant because of the biology that I've mentioned, the biology to do with the bacteria and the interaction of the bacteria with the roots of our crops, so that there is nitrogen fixation. Now, for the interaction between the roots and that is what we call soil to micro, plant microbe interactions. So now for the roots to attach or to engage the nitrogen, the bacteria, so that there's nitrogen fixation, there is a specific bacteria that is required by soybean. And I've mentioned that it is called Bradyrhizobium japonicum. So the Bradyrhizobium japonicum is very deficient in most soils and enzyme. So if you just plant your soybean without making sure that you inoculate, then it may as well result in a failed attempt. You'll be wasting your resources because it will fail to inoculate, it will fail to to fix nitrogen, and ultimately your yield will be very, very poor. So you need now to add an inoculant. You need to have an artificial bacteria, the artificial Bradyrhizobium japonicum. You mix it with the seed, so that when you are planting down there, it will be available in the soil. So in a nutshell, to inoculate is to make sure that you provide the artificial inoculant, the bacteria. You put the bacteria You know, I may not need to go into the details of how you do it, but then you just need to make sure that you mix the bacteria. I mean, you mix the inoculant with the seed, and then you plant. That's the inoculation process.
Okay, thanks Ngoni for taking that one, and Tipo is acknowledged to say she has understood. So thank you very much. I think that was the last question we could take because of our time. Thank you very much, farmers, for joining us today. And we would like to thank Fossil Agro for sponsoring this webinar and Ngoni for such a great presentation. And we also thank you, farmers, for the participation and for the interaction. So this marks the end of our webinar, and we would like to thank you once again all for in. We do hope that you have benefited. So we also encourage you to take advantage of our WhatsApp group, and I think we will also add Ngoni there so that if you have any questions, farmers, he will be able to respond to you. If you are not part of the WhatsApp group, please use the link that we have just sent on your Zoom. Just click that link and you will be directed to our WhatsApp group. So thank you very much. Have a great day, farmers. From us at Agribusiness Media and Rollins. Thank you.
Thank you so much.